saw this glow of light, just this kind of a halo of a light, just kind of beaming out.
He wanted to tell me about a crash of some sort of craft that had occurred on his ranch.
He would wad it up in his hand. When it hit the table, it spread out just like water with no wrinkles.
And it looked like there's a hieroglyphic type writing written along the inside surface of the I-beam.
They had no earlobe. They had 2 ear canals, 2 very small orifices for the nose, a concave face.
Oh yes, it was a cover-up from the beginning.
Roswell, Novo México, 1947. Uma vila militar junto de uma base da Força Aérea, sede do 509, grupo de bombardeiros. Uma comunidade muito unida de soldados e civis no coração da América rural. No verão de 1947, a América inteira parecia ter a febre dos discos voadores. Eram vistos por toda a parte. Em Roswell, várias testemunhas viram uma estranha luz no céu.
It was just going in a northerly motion at a pretty rapid speed, but nothing like a falling star or a meteorite. So bright like that, you couldn't look direct at it very long at a time. Then you had to look to the side of it, just like looking into a bright sun.
William Woody tem 61 anos, é criador de porcos e trabalha para a empresa de autocarros de Roswell. Ainda hoje se lembra da luz que viu no céu na noite de 4 de julho de 1947.
I was 13 years alive, and that's the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. We got in the old truck one morning and headed north out 285 just to see if we could locate it. Every exit or path off of the highway was blocked off with the military sentries, and said that that was under investigation and nobody was allowed to go either east or west off of the highway.
No rancho Foster, 120 km a noroeste de Roswell, Mac Brazel ocupava-se dos seus afazeres diários quando encontrou um material estranho espalhado pelos campos. As ovelhas recusavam-se a aproximar-se. Incapaz de identificar o que era, Brazel foi à casa do seu vizinho mais próximo, a 30 km dali, para lhe mostrar o que encontrara. Loretta Proctor tem 83 anos e ainda hoje vive no mesmo rancho, perto de Corona, a norte de Roswell. Lembra-se de ver Brazel chegar a cavalo com bocados de um material estranho.
He showed us this piece that looked like plastic or wood of some kind, and he said that there was some metallic looking stuff that when you crushed it, it just straightened right back out. It wouldn't stay crushed. And there was some beams or something that he said had kind of pinkish purple printing on it. Well, we told him it's probably a UFO and he should report it.
Brazel seguiu o conselho e foi até Roswell com os seus estranhos destroços e participou da descoberta ao xerife do condado de Chaves. O xerife George Wilcox informou imediatamente a base aérea. A base de Roswell albergava a 509, a esquadrilha de bombardeiros de elite que largara a bomba atómica no Japão. Sendo a única esquadrilha de bombardeiros atómicos do mundo, estava rodeada das mais apertadas medidas de segurança e segredo. O oficial de informações do 509 era o Major Jesse Marcel, a quem coube a missão de investigar o material trazido por Brazel. Marcel foi até ao rancho Foster para recolher alguns dos destroços. Nessa noite, trouxe-os para casa para mostrar à mulher e ao filho.
He came back real late one night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, as I recall, very excited because he woke myself, my mother up saying they found parts of a UFO or a flying saucer at that time. And he wanted me to see it because it was such of an unusual type of finding.
O Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. é piloto, coronel e cirurgião da Força Aérea em Reserva. Em 1947 tinha 12 anos, mas lembra-se perfeitamente das características extraordinárias do material que viu naquela noite em Roswell.
As I recall, the most unusual part of the debris that I saw was the I-beam fragments, or what I recall as being I-beam, because they were very light, very strong, and they had some writing along the inside surface of this. And that was the thing that really set this apart from anything I'd ever seen before.
Dan Dwyer e os colegas dos bombeiros de Roswell também estiveram envolvidos. Mostraram-lhes um material espantoso com propriedades curiosas. Frankie, a filha de Dwyer, estava presente quando ele pegou no material.
When I would wad it up, it was like I had nothing in my hand. I couldn't feel it touching my skin. It was real weird. You drop it on the table and it was just like water, the way it would spread out.
Entretanto, o Major Marcel levou o material que recolhera para a base de Roswell, onde o comandante coronel Butch Blanchard surpreendentemente ordenou ao seu oficial de relações públicas, o primeiro-tenente Walter Holt, que emitisse um estranho comunicado à imprensa.
I was instructed by Colonel Blanchard to put out a press release which in effect stated that we had in our possession a flying saucer. In essence, it said that we have in our possession a flying disc. It was picked up on a ranch, and I can't remember if I said northwest of Roswell, brought into town by Mac Brazel, the ranch foreman, and the material was flown to higher headquarters, 8th Air Force, General Ramey.
Foi uma notícia que espantou o mundo. O Daily Telegraph de Londres comentou: embora não tenham sido dados pormenores da nave, a Força Aérea afirma que era de construção frágil como um papagaio. Uma pequena cidade americana tornava-se o centro das atenções mundiais.
There was a tremendous amount of excitement because here I am, a little country editor in a small city in New Mexico, talking to Paris and Rome and London and Tokyo, and I can't remember all of them. Spent the whole afternoon on the phone, and I know that my counterparts at the Roswell, other Roswell paper, and probably at the radio stations did the same. But there was a lot of excitement.
A América estava petrificada. As rádios emitiam boletins noticiosos hora a hora.
Headline edition with Taylor Grant. All over the world. Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Russia has demanded UN action to get all foreign military personnel out of
O Major Marcel enviara amostras do material para o quartel-general da 8ª Força Aérea em Fort Worth, Texas. E foi aqui que o caso teve um desenvolvimento surpreendente. O comandante-general George Ramey convocou uma conferência de imprensa para o seu gabinete. Perante os fotógrafos, pediu ao Major Marcel que mostrasse o material que trouxera de Roswell. O oficial responsável pela meteorologia também foi convocado para explicar à imprensa o que o Major Marcel tinha nas mãos.
The general called and said, "Get your ass over here to my office. We got something here we want you to look at." And aye, sir. And he says, if you've got a car, fine. If you haven't, get one. Get the first means of transportation and get over to my office. And when I saw that, I said, "Is that your flying saucer?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, hell no. That's a Raven target and balloon. And if it isn't," I said, "I'd eat it without salt or pepper. I know what that is." Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. I know what that is.
This is what I would like to show you. In here, this is the photograph of the debris that was seen in General Ramey's office at Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas. This is my father holding up what is very obviously parts of radar target with balloon debris. In here, you see balsa wood fragments. You have actually parts of the balloon envelope in of itself, and you have what looks like paperback metal foil. And to emphasize this, this is not what was seen on the floor of our kitchen that evening or that late early morning hours in 1947. This is totally different.
Surge assim a suspeita de que o Major Marcel recebeu ordens para participar num encobrimento, trocando o material de Roswell por um vulgar balão meteorológico. O General Ramey e a Força Aérea desmentiam assim um anterior comunicado à imprensa em que se anunciava a descoberta de um disco voador. Oficialmente, o assunto estava encerrado. Mas em Roswell, os que tinham participado à descoberta aperceberam-se de que os militares tinham um comportamento estranho quanto ao que agora diziam ser um mero balão meteorológico. Frank Joyce foi o primeiro a dar a original notícia numa rádio local, a KGFL, poucas horas antes.
I got a phone call. Well, I got a number of phone calls, but the one that really got my attention was purportedly from the Pentagon. There was a young lady on the line saying, Colonel so-and-so, this is the Pentagon calling. And this was within a few minutes of it going out on the wire. And the voice on the line says, who is this? I tell him. He said, you put that story on the air about the flying saucers? And I mean, his voice was, you know, the type that really conveys menace and power. And I said, yes, I did. And he says, you're going to get in a lot of trouble for this, or made some threatening comment. And I said, look, I'm a civilian. You can't talk to me this way. You can't treat me this way. You can't tell me what to do in stories I put on the air. And he says, I'll show you what I can do. And bang, hung up the phone.
E a voz do outro lado mostrou precisamente o que podia fazer ao dono da rádio.
I got a call from Washington from one of the offices of one of the senators saying, look, if you put out any stories on this thing, you're going to lose your license. And it's not going to be over a period of time. It's going to be the same day that we tell you that you're off the air.
Frankie Rowe, a filha do bombeiro que tinha examinado o material, sempre considerara os militares de Roswell como amigos da cidade, mas uma inesperada visita de um deles iria fazê-lo mudar de ideias.
He had this club or stick or whatever it was, and he was beating it on his hand. And he would hit it. Every time he would say something, he'd hit his hand. And he said, I want you to know you were never there. And I didn't understand what he meant, because I said, yes, I was. And he said, no, you weren't. I said, yes, I was. And he said, can't you get this through your head? You never saw anything. You were not there. You don't know anything. And he said, you know, this is a big desert out here. We can just take you out in the middle of this desert and no one will ever find your bodies. He said, you'll be nothing but bones and nobody will ever know what happened to you. And I told him I would not talk about it.
Se não fossem as ameaças, todo o caso de Roswell poderia ser visto apenas como um engano embaraçoso. Mas em 1965, Butch Blanchard, então já general de 4 estrelas, esteve presente num jantar em Roswell, onde o incidente não fora esquecido.
He had been the commander here in 1947, and I was at a table with the general and several other locals when they were interrogating him about the 1947 incident, and he declined to answer any of the questions, except he did comment that it was the damnedest thing he'd ever seen.
He never would discuss it, but several months later, one night, I badgered him again, as I like to do, and he said, well, and he paused. He said, I'll tell you this, and I'm paraphrasing him because I don't remember exactly how he said it, but in essence, he said, What I saw, I've never seen before.
Durante 30 anos, o incidente de Roswell permaneceu um segredo insondável. A cidade e a base mantiveram um silêncio incômodo. A história só foi retomada em 1978, quando Jesse Marcel, o oficial de informações do 509, foi à televisão.
I was amazed at what I saw. The amount of debris that was scattered over such an area. It took me a while to realize that there's something strange about it. That the more I saw the fragments, the more I realized that it wasn't anything that I was acquainted with. I proved by trying to burn it, it wouldn't burn. I tried to break it, it would not break. If it was something of ours, I'm sure there would be no reason to keep it under cover that long. If it's an aerial spacecraft, there's another reason why it would not ever been owned by anybody here until they found out more about it. I sensed that there was a cover-up someplace about this whole matter.
Em 1947, o chefe de Estado-Maior do General Ramey era o coronel Thomas Dubose. Pouco antes de morrer, foi entrevistado frente a um vídeo caseiro. General reformado, foi o oficial de patente mais alta a comentar o incidente de Roswell.
Cover story, the balloon part of it, is the story that's to be given to the press, and that is it, and anything else, forget it. And McMullen, if you ever knew him, if you told him that he wanted to run something, he goddamn sure ran it. He knew every facet of the operation. He's a busybody. He wanted to know what the hell was going on, who was pissing on the sidewalk and all that sort of thing.
O general McMullen, segundo comandante do Comando Aéreo Estratégico no Pentágono, foi, segundo o general Dubose, o responsável por toda a operação.
McMullen told me, you are not to discuss this, and this is a point of which this is more than top secret, as he said. It's beyond that. It's within my priority as deputy to George Kennedy, and he in turn responsible to the president. This is the highest priority you can exhibit, and you will say nothing, and that was the end of it. And Jesus, that's from the commander-in-chief, and you forgot about it.
As revelações de Dubose sugerem que a Força Aérea tinha realmente algo importante a esconder.
There's no question about that. General Dubose said that specifically to us, that the balloon explanation that the Air Force offered was a cover story to get the reporters off General Ramey's back. So we have a wide body of testimony that was a cover-up. We have military witnesses saying they were sworn to secrecy. We have radio employees telling us that they were told if they broadcast their interview with Mac Brazel, they better look for a new job because they'd be out of the radio business the next day. We can show that beyond a shadow of a doubt. There's no question there was a cover-up. The question is, what were they hiding?
O que é que a Força Aérea terá escondido nestes 40 anos? O que poderá deter a chave do mistério é Frank Kaufman. Kaufman diz que em 1947 era sargento na base aérea de Roswell, mas o que ninguém sabia na altura, diz ele, é que também pertencia a uma unidade de contra-espionagem altamente secreta, nome de código, os 9. Hoje, Kaufman revela pela primeira vez o que afirma ser a verdadeira história do incidente de Roswell.
I was assigned to Roswell in 1942. My duties at that time was somewhat classified. The events that led up to the 1947 incident is rather peculiar because there is a lot of erratic movement on the radar screen, and this called our attention that maybe we better monitor those screens. They sent some of us to Alamogordo, the White Sands, to view the blips on the screens. The blips were just dancing from one end of the screen to the other, and then all of a sudden there was kind of a flash. And
It just disappeared. Well, that indicated that possibly maybe a plane or a missile or something just went down.
Kaufman diz que ele e a sua unidade deslocaram-se imediatamente de Alamogordo para Roswell, continuando depois até um local a cerca de 55 km a sul do rancho Foster.
And this was late at night. We started to clip some of the wire fence and drove into the area. The terrain was very rough at the time. There was no roads leading into it. We saw this glow of light, just this kind of a halo of a light, just kind of beaming out. We got to, I guess, maybe 200 yards, maybe 300 yards from where it was. And we learned right then and there it wasn't a plane, it wasn't a missile, it was kind of a strange-looking craft that was embedded in the arroyo. See? The size of the craft, I would say possibly maybe around 20, 25 feet in length, and it was open and kind of halfway, and one body was thrown up against the wall of the arroyo. The other one was half in and half out of the craft. And when we got in close, we noticed that there were probably 3 others inside the craft. Then we radioed in back to the base to have a truck, a flatbed, and a crane and everything else just come out to the site. And we prepared everything to clear everything off.
Frank Kaufman forneceu-nos o que afirma ser uma cópia do relatório oficial do incidente de Roswell, um documento altamente secreto que contém observações e desenhos do que ele viu na altura.
We saw panels of controls. We couldn't make them out. They were writings. We didn't know what it. We couldn't decipher it or anything of that nature. And the underbelly of the craft had a series of cells, quartz type cells, glass-looking cells, Arctic in shape.
Este é o local exato onde Kaufman diz que viu a estranha nave pela primeira vez. E este é um desenho dos extraterrestres, baseado nas descrições do próprio Kaufman.
We noticed one thing, that deterioration was beginning to set in on one of the bodies of the hands. We noticed the skin trying to shrivel up, and that's the reason why we put them in the bags real in a hurry and got them out to the base hospital. They called the mortuary here to find out if there was anything that they could preserve the bodies with.
A base perguntou também se havia caixões para crianças e mais tarde houve outro telefonema para a agência mortuária da cidade.
And I received a call later from the same mortuary officer stating that what embalming fluids contained consisted of what would it do to the blood contents, what would it do to tissue, stomach contents, and how would it alter it. And I informed him what the answers that he wanted.
Glenn Dennis detinha o contrato para o transporte em ambulância dos feridos para a base. Nesse mesmo dia, levou um aviador para o hospital da base e ficou espantado ao ser expulso sem cerimónias pela polícia militar, que lhe disse que ele não tinha nada que estar ali.
As they were taking me out, there was a door that was open over to the left, and there was a nurse coming out that had a towel over a portion of her face, and she looked up and she recognized me, and she said, "Glenn, get out of here. Get out of here as fast as you can. You're going to get in a lot of trouble." Then the next morning, she called me about 10 o'clock or so and said that she would like to see me, that we had to talk. And so I met her out at the officers' club that morning. And she was already there when I arrived at the officers' club. She was very upset, still crying, very hysterical. Then she told me what happened about going into this room. These doctors were there, and there was some 2 hospital gurneys there with the crash bags. One crash bag was 2 very small mutilated bodies. The other one, there was a very small body in a crash bag, but hadn't been mutilated as much as the others. And she told me the reason what they wouldn't let her out because they wanted her to write down what they were examining. And that's what she was doing. And they all became very ill. They said that the smell, and it was a very toxic smell, and they just couldn't breathe and get their breath, and they had to get out.
This is Hangar 84. And this is where the craft and the bodies were actually brought into this hangar. But there was a lot of activity in this area here. Inside the hangar, right above on top, there was this large spotlight which was shining down on the craft, and also the bodies were laid out. There were 5 of them. And there was a cordon of military police around the area to keep people getting too close.
Houve outras testemunhas das estranhas atividades no hangar 84.
I had security clearance, so I told him came over there to pick up Lieutenant Governor Joe Montoya. He was at the hangar.
Joe Montoya, vice-governador do Novo México, foi à base durante a sua campanha para a reeleição. À porta do hangar 84, Ruben Anaya esperava-o no carro.
So the APs just lead us over there, you know, and then, but they didn't park close to the hangar. They park about a half a block away. And I says, what the hell's going on, you know? And then, when they went over, I moved a little closer, and that's when the big hangar was open, and Senator Montoya came out. He says, let's get the hell out of here. He says.
Well, he come out of there. He come all scared, and he said they saw 2 little men with the big heads. But one was alive, still alive. They had him laying down on the floor, and he come out and told us that both was there, and one was still alive.
Houve mais testemunhas com estranhos relatos de extraterrestres. O bombeiro Dan Dwyer contou à filha Frankie o que vira.
He said it did not come from this world. Did not look like anything he had ever seen. And he said there were little people out there. And Mother asked him what he meant by little people, and he said they weren't human people, but they were little people. He said there were 2 that were already dead when they got there, and they were put into body bags. And I don't know if the one that was still alive had put them into the bags or if someone assisted at the time. There was one that was still alive and was walking around.
A mulher do xerife Wilcox contou mais tarde à filha o que ele disse que realmente acontecera.
She said that there was a flying saucer and that they even found some bodies by it, and one of them was alive, and that the Army, Air Force had come and threatened my father and his family to not mention anything at all about it.
De acordo com Frank Kaufman, os destroços e os corpos foram levados para a sede dos serviços de informação da Força Aérea em Wright Field, e um outro carregamento foi enviado para a base aérea de Andrews, em Washington.
How high did it go?
All the way to the president, I was told. President Truman.
The fact is, there is no proof, evidence, documentation, physical evidence of any sort to prove that your story is true.
That's right. You have to accept it. I mean, you either believe it or you don't. I mean, see.
Não existem provas independentes que corroborem a versão de Frank Kaufman. Diz que para provar o envolvimento em operações clandestinas teria de violar o seu juramento militar. A ausência de provas tangíveis tem sido uma constante do incidente de Roswell, até que, em princípios de 1995, apareceu em Londres um filme alegadamente feito por um operador de câmara militar americano.
Our cameraman says that the crash happened in June. He was sent down to White Sands on the 2nd of June, 1947, and that they'd spent a week and a half clearing up the area. He also explains that when they first arrived at the site, the area had been cordoned off, and that no one went anywhere near the vehicle. The ground surrounding the vehicle was hot. He said the creatures were all laying by the side, holding onto these oblong boxes, which they wouldn't let go. And after a few hours, when the military moved in, the instruction was to move away all the loose debris and the creatures.
Ray Santilli diz que levou 2 anos a negociar a compra deste filme. É a única pessoa que conhece a identidade do operador de câmara que fez o filme. Segundo Santilli, a má qualidade das imagens explica-se pelas condições em que foi filmado.
When he tells you that the camera had no zoom facility, when he tells you that he was wearing the same outfit as the surgeons, and when he says that these cameras had a fixed focus, and that when they moved in, that then there was no way of controlling the focus, and it was possible. He was steaming up inside the costumes, and he was trying to operate the cameras to the best of his ability. You just have to accept it. But the other question is, well, why isn't it a fixed camera? Why isn't it a camera fixed above looking at the body? But then his argument is that, well, surgeons were bending over it all the time, and the only way you can get to see these things is by moving around. And the camera that he detailed as using, we checked at the museum, and, it's a handheld camera.
Apesar de insistentes pedidos, Ray Santilli não nos proporcionou um encontro com o operador de câmara. Até agora, não temos nenhuma prova da sua existência. A Força Aérea nega categoricamente a existência de naves espaciais e de extraterrestres, mas crescentes pressões da opinião pública e um congressista determinado obrigaram o Pentágono a realizar uma investigação. Em julho de 1994, o relatório oficial reconhecia pela primeira vez que a história do balão meteorológico era de facto uma mentira, destinada a esconder o que realmente se despenhara em Roswell, um balão de outro tipo. Isto são imagens do projeto Mogul, um projeto altamente secreto destinado a detectar as ondas sonoras dos testes atómicos soviéticos. O relatório da Força Aérea conclui que o projeto Mogul é a explicação mais provável para o incidente de Roswell.
I suspect that our Flight 4 on the 4th of June was probably the source of the debris that the Ranger found. It was not recovered, and the record indicates that the B-17 abandoned tracking it while it was still airborne, and it's my memory that it was over a little town called Arabella, just north of Capitan and about 17 miles from where some debris was later found.
Curiosamente, um exame dos registros de voo da altura revela que não há qualquer registro do voo número 4 em 4 de junho, o tal que, segundo a Força Aérea, explicaria o incidente de Roswell. Moore diz que não está registado porque os voos que não tinham êxito não eram registados. No entanto, outros voos sem sucesso estão perfeitamente documentados. Discrepâncias como esta levaram muitos a duvidar da existência da Força Aérea no projeto Mogul como resposta para o mistério de Roswell. No Capitólio, o representante do Novo México, Stephen Schiff, suspeita do número de explicações diferentes apresentadas ao longo dos anos.
We've had 3 different explanations from the military about what crashed. The first explanation is it was a flying disc, meaning flying saucer in today's terminology. They changed that and said, we made a mistake. It wasn't a flying disc, it was a weather balloon. I still find it amazing that the United States top bomber wing, with the only wing that was eligible to carry nuclear weapons at that particular time, would not know a weather balloon from a flying saucer, but apparently somebody didn't, according to them. So we then had the second explanation that this was a weather balloon, and we now have the third explanation that this was part of a highly classified radiation detection experiment. So we have 3 separate explanations as to what crashed, but no dispute that something crashed.
Se não era um balão, o que é que se despenhou em Roswell? Um disco voador ou outra coisa? E como é que o controverso filme dos extraterrestres se relaciona com o mistério de Roswell? O Novo México é o estado mais secreto da União. Historicamente, os seus desertos e os seus céus foram palco de mais projetos científicos altamente secretos do que em qualquer outra região do mundo. Há, portanto, quem suspeite que por trás do incidente de Roswell possa estar uma estranha experiência militar altamente secreta. Há 50 anos deflagrava a primeira bomba atómica perto de White Sands, o teste Trinity. Este verão, aviões militares furtivos continuam a ser testados nos céus do Novo México. E quase meio século antes, o seu antecessor, a asa voadora, também foi vista nestes céus. Em 1947, White Sands era o local onde os Estados Unidos desenvolviam a nova tecnologia dos mísseis, com V2 capturadas aos alemães. Cientistas nazis tinham sido secretamente trazidos para cá no fim da guerra para desenvolverem a primeira fase do programa espacial americano. Wernher von Braun, o inventor da V2, era o responsável pela operação. Sabe-se que as experiências com animais faziam parte do programa espacial americano nos anos 50. Mas será que já as faziam em 1947?
One series, which was known as Project Albert, which launched a chimpanzee or a monkey, a small monkey, in one of the nose cones. Needless to say, the monkey didn't survive due to some technical difficulties with the nose cone in re-entering into the Earth's atmosphere.
When was that?
That was probably around the late 40s and the early 50s. And this was even before the famous Ham, the space chimpanzee, which was trained over at the Alamogordo Air Force Base.
Could it have been as early as 1947?
Probably around 1947. I know that Project Albert began with, I believe, V2 number 47.
A nossa investigação revela pela primeira vez que provavelmente se efetuaram experiências com animais muito antes do que anteriormente se julgava. Se assim foi, poderá o incidente de Roswell ter sido uma experiência altamente secreta que correu catastroficamente mal? Será possível que um V2 com animais a bordo se tenha descontrolado, explicando assim as descrições de corpos e estranhos destroços feitas por tantas testemunhas em Roswell? Será que o material com propriedades tão curiosas encontrado no rancho Foster provinha de um V2 que se despenhou?
We have researched our records extensively, and on that specific date and time, and even that month, we had nothing that could conceivably be within that area. We had been launching some balloons, but nothing in that particular month when the crash at Roswell occurred. And all of our rockets that we did launch could be accounted for during that time period. And there was nothing that White Sands had available at that time that could reach that far over to Roswell. As far as White Sands is concerned, we're pretty clean on this incident.
A crer nas autoridades militares, os registros afastam a possibilidade de se tratar de um V2, mas os militares já admitiram ter mentido antes para encobrir algo mais secreto. É esta possibilidade que leva muitos a pensar que o encobrimento continua e, de acordo com Ray Santilli, o operador de câmara da alegada autópsia do extraterrestre, parece proporcionar uma pista espetacular.
They're not alien creatures as far as he's concerned. He just calls the creatures freaks all the time. He says they've got no reason to be here, and he says he doesn't know what they are. Our cameraman's a very religious guy. He just refuses to believe. And he was there at the time. He saw everything that happened, but he refuses to believe that these are extraterrestrials. He just says that, you know, it's just some goddamn experiment, and that's it. You know, he just calls them freaks. You have to remember, this is a cameraman that was there at White Sands, with the Trinity experiments as well. It appears that lots of weird and wonderful things happened at that time.
Para além da autópsia, há imagens de estranhos destroços alegadamente recolhidos no local onde o veículo espacial se terá despenhado. O que quer que o filme de Santilli seja, não há dúvida de que requer uma investigação séria. Estes símbolos crípticos têm alguma semelhança com as letras V-I-D-E-O. Vídeo. Apesar das dúvidas quanto à sua autenticidade, levámos o filme para os Estados Unidos e mostrámo-lo a algumas das testemunhas que tínhamos entrevistado sobre o incidente de Roswell.
The symbols are vaguely consistent with my memory, since I can't be absolutely sure though, but they certainly could be consistent with what I saw. The differences would be the size and the fact that the ones I saw were not raised above the level of the beam.
I'm trying to count the fingers in there. That's six. I don't recall 6 fingers, though. I don't know. I won't swear to it, John. I don't recall those 6 fingers, though. To be honest with you, it doesn't look too close to the Roswell incident. I can say that much.
O Dr. Ian West é um dos mais proeminentes médicos patologistas britânicos. A Scotland Yard costuma recorrer a ele em investigações de homicídios.
The blood is pattern is unusual. You don't normally get, that incision has been open for some time now. We've got 4 little trails running from it. Although we have a number of quite distinct linear trails, dark trails, which look like blood trails, they're not of the nature that I would expect to see at a post-mortem. I would see some more smearing, some more irregularity in the blood loss from the margins of the incision. One has seen one distinctive organ removed from the upper central abdominal region. It's of the size of a liver, but it's not of the liver shape, and it's not in the liver position. I've seen no intestines that I can distinguish. I can't distinguish the thoracic organ. It certainly doesn't resemble, from what one can see here, any human remains that I've ever seen. There's just no evidence to say this is definitely nothing on the film which makes me say this is definitely a hoax. My feeling is that probably about 98% is that this is probably a man-made hoax. I have, as I say, a 2% area where I don't know.
In my opinion, I think it's a special effect. It's man-made. It's a good special effect. It's not going to be a cheap item. It's going to be, a few $100,000 probably. It's difficult to say when something like that could have been made. Certainly in the 60s they were doing things at Hammer, which were very similar. I would guess that it was not before the 60s, but sort of mid-60s I would think would be the earliest it could be. I don't think anyone could be certain that it's a special effect. I mean, how do I know what the inside of aliens looks like? No one knows. I know what the inside of foam rubber and polyurethane foam looks like, and it looks very similar.
Many people who are deeply suspicious about the film think that you could be behind the hoax yourself. What have you got to say to that?
I'll still go back to what I said before. If someone, even if it was our company, wanted to hoax a piece of footage, why not do the job properly? Why not create something that really looks like an alien creature? Why come up with something where you've got these unnecessary hurdles of saying, well, is it human or is it not human? And in answer to your question, we didn't hoax it.
Are you sure?
Absolutely sure. 100% sure. I mean,
Neste momento, não existe nenhuma prova conclusiva que permita dizer se o filme é verdadeiro ou um embuste. Estabelecer a sua proveniência é um fator crítico para a resolução do mistério de Roswell. Um dos passos vitais seria fazer uma análise química do filme num laboratório fotográfico.
Are you going to provide proper a film extract which can be properly tested by Kodak, which has proper images on it?
I'll provide you with a film. I'll provide you with what I can, which will be a film with image, and the only way that I can do that is by securing some film from the collector that bought the first autopsy, which is currently en route to us.
Até agora, não foi fornecido nenhum extrato do filme para o laboratório poder determinar o ano em que foi fabricado, mas continuamos a insistir. Em Washington, a procura de provas tangíveis do que aconteceu em Roswell continuou numa outra frente.
The issue is providing to the public whatever records may still exist, if any, and there may not be any, but if any on the Roswell incident, so people can make their own determination. That is the mission that I discussed with the General Accounting Office.
A General Accounting Office é uma instituição poderosa que vigia os atos do governo. Tem vindo a investigar várias agências governamentais em busca de registros oficiais do incidente de Roswell. Em julho deste ano, a General Accounting Office anunciou que a Força Aérea tinha destruído todos os documentos relacionados com Roswell. Para os teóricos da conspiração, tudo isto parece demasiado conveniente, mas um homem que deveria saber se Roswell alguma vez constou em documentos secretos é Frederick Durand. Em 1952, investigou todo o dossiê dos discos voadores a pedido da CIA.
If there had happened in 47, we would have known about it in 52 or 53 when I was involved. And I truly believe that we had the best information available in the intelligence community, including the White House and the National Security Council. And the investigation would certainly have, in fact, it was not even considered in the Blue Book because it was meteorological balloon wreckage.
But you are absolutely convinced that what you have told us what you saw and that is 100% accurate?
I am absolutely 101,000%. It's the truth.
The whole truth, nothing but the truth?
That's right. As Ripley would say, believe it or not.
Durante quase 50 anos, o incidente de Roswell resistiu a todas as tentativas de uma explicação racional. No mundo dos mistérios dos ovnis, tornou-se o mais célebre de todos. Na ausência de qualquer prova física, tudo se resume a uma questão de fé. No decurso da nossa investigação, deparamos com um emaranhado de factos e fantasias em que testemunhas credíveis contam histórias inacreditáveis com aparente sinceridade e personagens incríveis fazem afirmações espetaculares que nos fazem duvidar do seu bom senso. Mas poderão tantas pessoas vulgares do coração da América rural estar a mentir ou afetados por um síndrome da memória falsa com tantas versões idênticas da mesma história?
Basically, I think you'll find that the people who are telling you these stories are very ordinary Americans.
I know it happened. I know it was real. The threats were real.
I think that they're covered up some, and I think they should tell the truth to the public now.
Hoje, o incidente de Roswell continua envolto em mistério. A Força Aérea insiste que não há nenhum segredo a esconder e, no entanto, num último desenvolvimento, uma fonte próxima do Pentágono informou-nos que surgiram agora documentos secretos e que, nos próximos meses, um novo relatório virá explicar os misteriosos relatos de estranhos corpos. É muito possível que o enigma do incidente de Roswell venha a transformar-se num Watergate cósmico.
General Ramey describes the object as being of flimsy construction, almost like a box type. He says that it was so battered that he was unable to determine whether it had a disc form, and he does not indicate its size. Ramey says that so far as can be determined, no one saw the object in the air, and he describes it as being made of some sort of tinfoil. Other Army officials say that further